listening to the Good Enough Wellness Podcast. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Emily.
And we're passionate about holistic wellness that real people with real lives can achieve.
We see you out there striving for perfection, but we want you to know that good enough can be good enough.
Before we get started, everything we talk about in this show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Always talk to your healthcare provider before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, medication, or supplements.
Welcome to Body Literacy 101. School is now in session. Your instructor today is nutritional therapy practitioner Kayla King. This is the fourth of 8 sessions, which will explore the basic functions of the body and get you more comfortable in your own skin. And now, session 4, the reproductive system.
Where do I even start with the reproductive system? This is such a deep dive, and just know that this is only scratching the surface. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the reproductive system. It's so complex, but we really believe that there's a lot of simple things you can do to just get started. So the reproductive system, for a large part, relies on the endocrine system to be working properly. In order to understand the reproductive system, we have to understand the endocrine system. Often, the reproductive hormones are the first to, quote-unquote, shut off in order to shuttle vital nutrients to the stress organs or glands to make stress hormones. If you think about it, your body does not want you to reproduce if it perceives that you are in danger. The danger you could be encountering may be blood sugar dysregulation, fasting, excessive toxin load, work, life, or home stress, over or under exercise, excessive blue light exposure, or certain biohacking trends, but your body won't know the difference between that and running for its life. All it knows is stress is stress.
Right, yeah.
Now, as for the actual hormones needed for reproduction, both men and women use all the same hormones, just in different levels for different purposes. So let's start with the male reproductive hormones. At the onset of puberty, the hypothalamus begins producing gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH. This hormone triggers the release of luteinizing hormone, or LH, and follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, from the pituitary.
I'm so glad these all have shortened versions
Yes.
because I'm already a little lost, but carry on.
So LH stimulates the secretion of testosterone. Some testosterone gets converted by enzymes into dihydrotestosterone, or DHT, and some gets converted to estrogen. And estrogen is essential for men, obviously within certain parameters, but it is responsible for sperm motility and maturation. Like most hormones, via negative feedback loop, the increase in testosterone suppresses the release of LH, which then suppresses GnRH. FSH and testosterone together are responsible for creating sperm. The adrenal glands produce progesterone, both in men and women outside of reproductive age.
This one really surprised me because I know estrogen is a thing for men because it can easily become a problem, but I never really thought about progesterone being a male hormone too, because we talk about with women so much, like it's such a big deal for us. But I'm curious to see how it plays a part in their reproduction.
Yeah, so progesterone for men aids in the creation of sperm and their ability to fertilize an egg. Like it makes the sperm able to actually fertilize the egg, not only just get to it, but fertilize it. Mm-hmm. It can also help with sleep and with fighting cancer.
All great things.
Yeah. So let's switch over to the female reproductive hormones. So in women, GnRH from the hypothalamus triggers the release of FSH and LH from the pituitary. Follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the growth of the follicles. The growing follicles release estrogen, and estrogen is the growth hormone. It causes the endometrium layer in the uterus to thicken. By about day 6 in a normal healthy cycle, one of the many growing follicles on both ovaries will outgrow the others and become the dominant follicle.
That's the whole thing with estrogen dominance and endometriosis, right?
Yes.
The estrogen, they always say it's like a creation, a growing hormone. Mm-hmm. So the estrogen must cause the lining to overgrow, which is when you have the painful periods, the blood clotting, and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yes, and endometriosis can actually grow outside of the uterus then with endometriosis. So it can adhere to your intestines or your lungs or your heart. Like, they can find
Wow.
endometrial tissue lots of places in your, like, body cavity, I guess.
That's crazy. That must be why people end up having surgery for it. Is that correct?
Excision surgeries, yeah. So, another note about, like, estrogen dominance and, like, it being a growth hormone, like if you have fibroids or like cysts, things like that, that's also typically an estrogen dominance issue because it's stimulating growth.
Right, yes.
So because estrogen spikes due to the growth of the follicles, the hypothalamus turns up the production of luteinizing hormone, which causes the dominant follicle to rupture and release an egg. This process is called ovulation.
Oh, okay.
The leftover follicle that held the egg then turns into the corpus luteum, which provides progesterone. Progesterone, which we can think of as the progestation hormone.
I had never thought about that. That makes perfect sense.
I heard that one day and I was like, that makes so much sense, I'm going to forever remember that.
Yes.
It's what confirms ovulation. It confirms that a follicle did indeed release an egg and then turn into the corpus luteum. It also acts as a dam holding up the uterine lining so that the potentially fertilized egg can implant.
Ah, I see, yes.
If a fertilized egg implants, it releases human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG, and this is what pregnancy tests usually measure.
I see, okay.
And it releases that about 8 days after fertilization. So if your body detects HCG, it will stimulate the corpus luteum to continue releasing progesterone, to continue holding up the uterine lining. If no HCG is detected, the corpus luteum degenerates into the corpus albicans and stops producing progesterone, which then allows the uterine lining to slough off, which is menstruation.
Okay.
So low progesterone is a sign of poor follicle health, which then would lead to poor corpus luteum health, and if there isn't enough progesterone to hold up the uterine lining until the placenta is able to take over, there is an increased risk of early term loss.
Right. That must be why a lot of people end up supplementing progesterone, like early pregnancy.
Yes, it's to help sustain a pregnancy if the corpus luteum can't keep up. Runs out of progesterone before the placenta can take over.
I see.
So wrapping this up and bringing it back to our good enough principles, there are really simple things that we can do to improve our reproductive health, our sperm health, our follicle health, which then would lead to, good egg quality, things like that. And first and foremost is reproduction happens out of an abundance.
Right.
So we need to have an abundance of energy, an abundance of resources to be able to create. So this could look like making sure you're eating enough, just enough calories in general, eating enough nutrients, so making sure you have adequate protein, fat, and carbs, and adequate vitamins and minerals. So eating those nutrient-dense foods, proper hydration, all that kind of stuff really can improve our chances of reproductive health.
Yeah, I think it's funny how everything that you just said, all the things to improve it, is like kind of also the way that you sustain yourself in general. So like your health is also dependent on your reproductive health, and your reproductive health is dependent on your health. And the more that you are nurturing yourself, the easier your body can nurture a growing baby.
Right. And even if you don't want a baby, it's still really important because, we need to be healthy, and a good sign of health is our reproductive health, because if our body is super healthy and has an abundance of resources, it will be able to procreate.
Yes. Yeah, you don't have to want kids to be able to produce kids.
Exactly.
And I think, too, can you talk a little bit about how this translates for men, too? Because I think a lot of times men kind of get shoved in this box of like, well, you can... Sperm is coming out, so all must be fine. It's like, well, all is not fine, actually. Yeah. And we were just talking offline here about how 50% of the DNA comes from the sperm. Like, they're not just... There's a lot of jokes about how, like, oh, you help for 2 minutes and then you're done. It's like, well, you provided, like, a very important part to making this human being, and how can we make sure that men are also good enough, so to speak, to not just procreate, but then also be healthy in general.
Yeah, so for men, I think one of the most important things to realize is that it takes about 100 days for sperm to mature before it is ejaculated. And the things that help create healthy sperm include lots of antioxidants, protects from oxidative damage. Sperm is really, really delicate, and they are outside of the body, technically. I mean, they're inside the body, but the testicles are just kind of hanging there. And so they're kind of exposed to a lot down there, rather than, like, inside of a body cavity like ovaries are.
Yeah.
So they're exposed to a lot of, like, oxidative stress from exercise and heat. Sperm needs to be kept cool. That's why the testicles hang low.
Right, that's why they're outside the body, because your body temperature is actually, like, too much for them.
Right, so if you're wearing, this is why, you don't wear tight underwear, it's because then it holds the testicles up too close to the body, keeps them too warm. They're just exposed to a lot of potential damages down there. And then toxins are extremely damaging to sperm. There are some studies coming out that men who are in utero and their mothers used fragranced like body washes or perfumes, anything with a fragrance. A lot of these men are now experiencing infertility in their 20s and 30s.
Wow.
Due to the fact that their mothers were using fragrance while their sons were in utero.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to consider when it comes to, like, sperm health.
Right, and reducing toxins, it doesn't have to be, like, all or nothing. Like, you don't have to throw everything away. Like, chances are the people who are having issues with that now, like when we're talking about fragrance exposure, we're not just talking about, like, their mom used hand soap we're talking about, like, that good old, like, mall
Bath and Body Works.
And it was in everything, right? Your hand soap and your body wash and your lotion and your sugar scrub, and, like, so we're not just talking about, like, an exposure here and there. We're talking about, like, prolonged, and then, like, they mopped with Fabuloso and all that stuff. So it doesn't have to be quite that complicated. In fact, that sounds like a whole podcast episode in itself. Some toxin reducing stuff that's good enough. You don't have to be freaking out and taking your own hand soap when you go out places. It
doesn't have to be that extreme, but taking the steps that you can take when you can take them, every little bit counts. And some people have, like, the way that their genes are, they are more able to detox things than other people.
Right.
You can think of, like, detox as, like, a sink drain, and some people have, like, one of those strainers, like basket strainers in the bottom that's plugged up.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter how fast or slow the trickle is, it's going to build up, whereas some people have, like, a wide open, like, no drain at all, basically, and it just goes right through. So these are all, like, factors to consider. Other common toxins that are very damaging for sperm are the soft plastics, so, like, plastic baggies, the crinkly water bottles, things like that. Those can be pretty detrimental for sperm health. But things we can do to increase sperm quality, sperm health: eat enough, eat often, balance the blood sugar, eat lots of antioxidant-rich foods, so richly colored foods, focus on whole foods.
Really all the same things for the woman. So
exactly.
If you're out there trying to get pregnant, do it together.
Yes, yep.
Yes.
There's a big gut microbiome factor when it comes to fertility in general. Just doing the best you can with what you got. And stress is a huge part of this. We touched on that at the top of the episode, where, if your body perceives stress, and that can be anything from work life or home drama to fasting to excessive blue light exposure
to freaking out about every single toxin you
Yep.
come in contact with.
Yep,
Yeah.
to scheduling sex 2 and 3 times a day so that you can make sure you make that baby. It
Yeah.
all is,
It happens, yeah.
the body perceives it as stress. So reducing stress, keeping some joy, in the journey, and focusing on whole foods, nutrient dense diet.
Yeah. I feel like it always comes back to that.
Yep.
Amazing. Thank you for listening to the Good Enough Wellness Podcast.
To learn more about my one-on-one packages, join my mailing list and follow me on Instagram at Kayla King Wellness. Don't forget to subscribe to the Good Enough Wellness Podcast feed wherever you listen to podcasts. You don't want to miss an episode.
Join our community over on Instagram at Good Enough Wellness Podcast to learn about upcoming episodes and interact with the Good Enough community.
The Good Enough Wellness Podcast, because good enough can be good enough.
Well, that's good enough for me.
Me too.